everyone, welcome back to Reissued. If you're new here, my name is Andrew. Greetings from Chicago. I am midway into my first week here dancing at Lyric Opera of Chicago. So happy to be here, but also so excited to be sharing with you my finished PAX wardrobe doors that we finished up just before I left for Chicago. This whole PAX system has been a long process here on my channel, starting with the road trip to Tennessee that my dad and I took in the old Matrix to get the initial PAX setup secondhand from someone on Facebook Marketplace. Then we rounded out the rest of the PAX setup with more pieces from the IKEA As-Is section, and then last time where we DIY'd some doors with some thrifted melamine from the REISSUED. Today I'm going to show you how we finished these doors off with a couple simple DIY treatments to help them feel a lot more unique and elevated and integrated into my bedroom space. You can mix and match these techniques depending on the look that you're going for, whether you have existing PAX doors that just need a facelift, or if like me you DIY'd your own doors from melamine or MDF and you want to finish off the doors and give them a nice customized look. Clearly we've already finished things up. I know the after is going to be amazing, so I can't wait to show you the process. Let's jump on it. So first things first, just to recap, we DIY'd our own doors using some melamine that I got at the REISSUED for $10 a piece. So not only am I wanting to change the look and the finish of these, they have that like very early 2000s like faux birch light wood melamine type look, but also the edge of these are unfinished particle board at the moment, so we need to get something on there to seal it in and make it look finished. Before we got started on these, I did a couple of tests with the materials that we would be using with the offcuts of the melamine that we had left over after we cut down the doors, just to be sure that all these materials were going to work well together, to find the best way to make everything adhere, and to find the best order of operations. So to kick this off, everybody's favorite activity, sanding. We start by sanding things down by hand with an 80 grit sandpaper. This sandpaper is super rough, and so it's going to kill the shine on the surface of the melamine and help everything to adhere. When I did my test, the wallpaper paste just kind of beaded up on the unsanded melamine because it wasn't sinking in at all. And so giving this a little bit of sanding is going to give something for that adhesive to sink into. Let's go ahead and do both sides here. We're going to be adhering wallpaper to one side and painting the other side. Both of those treatments could benefit from a nice sanding, so let's go ahead and do that now. And once we give these a good sanding, we can wipe them down with TSP to remove any residual dirt or oils. Also note here, when we made the doors, we went ahead and hung them in place just to make sure that everything fit properly. So when we took them down to start the resurfacing process, I went ahead and marked inside of each of the hinge holes with both the top and bottom marking, as well as a 1 through 5 numbering system from left to right, just to make sure that we know the correct order and which side is the top and bottom, so that when we're placing our pattern later, we have a good sense of how to adhere everything properly. That will also ensure that they go back in the right spot where we already know that they fit well. Alright, let's paint. We're using a color match of the shade Blanche from Magnolia. This is the same paint that's on the trim in the bedroom, all over the angled cabinet, same shade that's on the wall as well. Again, I'm loving painting the trim and the walls the same color because I think it makes everything feel super clean and a little bit more modern. I saw something recently that this is called color drenching and it's a trend. Is that a thing? Does it count if it's just cream and not a real color? Let me know in the comments, is color drenching a thing? In any case, this paint already has an additive BB Frosh in it that's going to help it bond even better to the melamine surface. We added this in back in the bedroom makeover process when we were painting the angled cabinet since they had a really shiny surface on them. It really helps the paint to bond even without any sanding, and so with the additional sanding that we did, this should hold up pretty well. I'm going to be using these doors a lot, and so we really want to prevent any sort of scraping or peeling of the paint. Next step here is to apply this black melamine banding that I got on Amazon around the edges of the doors, both to seal in that raw particle board edge and also to give a nice graphic detail. Our melamine is 5/8 of an inch thick, and the banding that we got is 3/4 of an inch thick, so that's an 1/8 of an inch difference. I got this banding on Amazon, and it comes in a whole bunch of different widths, so conceivably we could have gotten a 5/8 inch width to go on the outside of the doors and not have to worry about cutting anything down. However, in our research on this process, we saw that a lot of professional cabinet makers and builders will use a slightly thicker banding and then cut off the excess just to ensure that the banding really fully covers the outside edge. The last thing that we want there is to leave any of this raw particle board exposed. When I did my tests initially, I cut down the additional width just using a utility blade, and because the sample was so small, it looked pretty okay, but when we did it on the bigger door, it was just such a long area that you could see how sort of wavy and uneven my cut was. So we went back to the drawing board and found a new solution here. So here's the process that we found most workable. First, we cut a length of the banding just longer than the length of the door. It's nice to go ahead and cut it so that it's easier to handle, but we also want to leave that extra bit of length just to be sure that we have enough. Then I start applying the banding with an iron, lining up the straight edge with the inside edge of the door, which is the painted side. That way when you open the door, the contrast between the creamy white and the black is a nice, clean, straight, perfect line. After some trial and error here, I found that the cotton setting on my iron was best for this. That's like the second from the hottest setting. I tried on some lower heat settings as well, and it bonded okay, but going on the hotter setting really seemed to secure everything a bit better. Once we've ironed everything in place, I can go in with my utility blade right along the edge and cut it flush with the edge of the door. We want this corner to be nice and crisp where the two edges meet, and so we want to cut as closely as possible there. Next, we flip the piece over and use a really sharp chisel to cut off that extra bit along the front of the door. My dad is holding the chisel super flat and just sliding it along the face of the door in order to cut the banding as close to flush with the front of the door as possible. Cutting it in this way using the chisel and using the front of the door as a reference was much more clean and smooth and consistent than my jagged utility blade cuts.
Perfect.
Everyone's missed you in a video. At this point, I went in with the iron again to go back and just really melt everything into place, hitting it from different angles, kind of up over the corner, straight along the side. I do this a lot throughout the process to be sure that everything is really bonded in place. Anywhere that the edges were peeling up a little bit, it was really prone to breakage when we were handling the doors a lot, and so we want to secure everything down as much as possible to prevent the banding from breaking. Let's follow these same steps for all 4 sides of the door, and then for all 5 doors. Now we can apply our shades. So these are the Bantistel window panels from IKEA. I believe this is a discontinued product now. I was able to find 4 of them in store and I had to order the 5th one online. If you like this product, go and purchase it right now before they're out of stock entirely. Before we glue these in place, we want to cut them down to fit our doors. We cut the length to 89 5/8 inches, and then we cut 1.5 inches off of one side since I had a specific place where I wanted the banding to line up with the pattern, and then we cut an additional 3¼ inches off the other side to make these the right width. Basically, we made these 18 3/4 inches by 89 5/8 inches so that there's a 3/8 inch gap between the edge of our shade and the edge of the door all the way around. That way, the melamine banding will be able to adhere both to the door itself as well as to the front of the fabric and really seal off that raw edge and bond everything together. I found in my sample that even when we bonded the shade pretty well to the doors, anytime a corner wanted to peel up, it was really easy for it to continue peeling, and so sealing off those edges is going to be a really important way to help these last. When we first started cutting these down, I was assuming that they were all going to be the same because this is a manufactured product from IKEA and I assumed that every shade would be identical. However, these are not identical. So after we opened them all up, we just went ahead and cut them down to size at random and then rearranged the panels until we got kind of a nice mix of where the pattern was falling. I think these shades were a great choice for this project for a couple of reasons. First of all, I really like the look of these. I wanted something that was really dimensional and textured, and these have not only a nice texture to them, but a little bit of subtle pattern that brings together some of the colors in the room and offers even more dimension. The last thing that I want here is this whole wall of wardrobes to just feel really flat or too glossy or hard. At this point in the room, I'm really trying to introduce as much softness as possible to kind of contrast a lot of those hard modern lines. And I think the combo of texture and pattern here is really going to give us that softness. Also, this type of product is really nice for this application because it is quite stiff. I had initially planned to do this with fabric, but unless you're working with the really stiff fabric, it can be hard to lay things out and cut things really square and get everything nice and flat and not stretching in random directions. And so this type of product was really solid and stiff and easy to place on the front of the doors. Let's glue these in place. I started by going in with denatured alcohol on these just to give them a final wipe down, again to remove any residual dust or oils. We've been handling these a lot up to this point, so we want to get them nice and clean again. And then I go in and start rolling on heavy duty wallpaper paste. This one is from Zinsser. It's the same product that I used in the half bathroom to adhere the faux croc wallpaper to the wall. That held up super well. I've been really happy with how that product performed, and so we thought we would give that another try here. The other thing that I like about this specific adhesive is that it's transparent and it dries transparent. The Bantistel shades are a little bit porous, so I wanted to be sure that if any of the paste kind of seeped through, that it wasn't going to create any stains or yellowing. As I roll it on, I'm trying my best to apply it thickly and evenly. And then we can put the shade in place, eyeballing an equal distance from the edge all the way around. Once we get these in place, my dad went in with a heavy roller tool that he had on hand from when my parents did Formica in their kitchen like a million years ago. He started rolling from the center and working outward. This is a great way to just remove any air bubbles and get everything nice and smooth and bonded. This also helped us to identify any areas that needed more glue, like if they were continuing to pop up consistently. We could just lift up the edge, put a little bit more glue under, and then press everything back down in place. Let's leave these to dry for 24 hours and come back and finish these up. Now we can apply the final banding on the front and finish these off. This whole remaining process took place in like the last 24 hours before I left for Chicago. I was putting my stuff together, packing things up, getting the doors in place, shooting the after. So we were really down to the wire on this one. Luckily, you know, I had the Magic Mind flow going, helping me stay on track and organized during this stressful process. That 7-hour burst of calm energy and productivity really helped me stay focused and push this project across the finish line. We start applying the front banding on the shorter edges that will be at the top and bottom. I cut a super square edge and wedge that all the way up into the corner. Then we hold that in place, pull it across, and then cut as close as possible to the edge so that we have our length. I found that lining up a piece of painter's tape with the edge was helpful in giving sort of a template to make that cut. Next, we start at one end and press that banding down in place, ensuring that it comes far enough over the edge to cover up sort of the edge of the side, if that makes sense. I decided that it was best to put the side edges on first, so that when the front edge went on, it could kind of cover up that edge and give a nice clean look from the front. As we work across, we can go ahead and line up that other corner and seal everything in place. Same thing on the other short side. Now for the longer edges, I didn't want to make any cuts to start, since the longer length meant there was more margin of error in the cut. So we started at one edge, again cutting the edge really square, wedging it in there up against the other piece, holding that in place, working our way across, again making sure that we're coming up over the edge enough. And then once we're close to approaching the other edge, I go in with my painter's tape again, mark flush with the existing front banding that's there, and cut as close to that as possible. It wasn't always a perfect cut. Sometimes it was too long and I had to go back and cut it again. Sometimes it was a little bit short and I had to really press it into place to close that gap. This banding is pretty malleable when it's still hot, which is nice because if you get something placed in the wrong area, you can just heat it up again and kind of press it over to where you want it. That also can be difficult as you're going along, especially if you're doing this by yourself, where as long as it's hot, it will continue to shift and move a little bit, maybe not drying where you initially placed it. So you can see a lot here. Once we get started on one side, my dad holds that initial seam in place so that as I'm moving along and pulling it the other way, we don't have a gap opening up there. So just keep an eye out for that and grab an extra set of hands if you can. And the doors are done. Let's hang these in place and check out the finished look. But first, let's do a cost breakdown here and compare what it would be to buy some basic 4-sand doors in the IKEA store versus what I spent to DIY my own custom doors. Note here that I'm not including the cost of the complement hinges or the long black Billsboro handles that we used here. These are items that I just purchased full price at IKEA. So in my cost breakdown, I'm just comparing the elements that I DIY'd with a comparable store-bought element. So if I were to buy 5 basic 90-inch 4-sand doors, which are the simplest and least expensive doors, those come to $60 each here in the United States, which brings my total to $300 for 5 doors. So let's talk about my DIY costs. I got the melamine at the REISSUED for $10 a piece, which brings my melamine total to $50. I picked up the black melamine banding on Amazon for $39. I still had a fair bit left over as well. I got the Zinsser wallpaper paste on Amazon for $15 and probably used about half the jar. And then finally, the Bantistel shades from IKEA were at $19 a piece for a total of $95 for all 5, which brings my grand total for my DIY to $199. So that's almost a $100 difference, which is not like a crazy mind-blowing margin. And of course, we're not including the number of hours that went into DIYing these, but the key thing here for me is that these look totally custom, totally one of a kind, and totally appropriate in this space. So let me know in the comments, do we love the finished doors and was it worth the DIY? Can't wait to hear what you think about these. All right, the reveal is upon us. If you enjoyed this video, if you love how these doors turned out, be sure to hit the like button. If you want to see more DIY projects like this, be sure that you're subscribed. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys soon.